Howdy friends, my name is Milo. Big shocker, I know. I want to just say real quick at the start of this video that I have opened a P.O. box and I'm going to be doing a fan mail segment in the future. Because last video people said they really liked the idea and that I should do it. So if you would like to send me books, cool things you found, things that preferably aren't illegal, you can send them to this address right here. Please don't put P.O. box because sometimes it will not end up actually sending it to the right place. Just do unit or number for that and it will get to me. Anyway, Gianfranco, give us a sick intro and let's get right into the video. Likely familiar with this image. It is called the March of Life, and it was coined in 1965 by Rudolf Zallinger. Since its initial creation in the 60s, this has been sort of an iconic representation of human evolution. But there are two things which you may not know about it. The first is that this took me about an hour and a half to draw, and the second is that it is a gross oversimplification of how evolution works. While Zallinger's model suggests an almost linear idea of evolution, in reality the human family tree is just as tangled as any family tree you have ever seen. And it is for this reason that I would like to welcome you to the first episode of a new series which I am going to be calling Lost Lineage. I'd like to thank my Discord user Alpha Saja for helping come up with that name. Well done. In this series, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about every single one of our human evolutionary ancestors. This series will likely be in 4 parts. Each chapter will be focusing on its own branch of our human evolutionary tree, and within each one of those chapters there will be multiple episodes talking about each one of the human ancestors which fall under that branch. For our humans chapter, we have things like Homo erectus and Homo habilis. For our Australopithecines, we have Australopithecus africanus and Australopithecus afarensis. And then for our robust Australopithecines, we have things like Paranthropus robustus and Paranthropus boisei. And of course, there will be many more. I mean, look at that tree. But today, we are going to be kicking it off with the oldest group of our ancestors. A group known as early hominins. I'm sorry, guys. I need a little bit of room to write here. Guy holding the ice cream cone can live. Since today we're going to be talking about early hominins, it is important to start off by making a distinction between two words which sound pretty much the exact fucking same. Those of course being hominin and hominid. Jesus Christ, do you have to be bowling right now? Hominids is a much broader category. It is composed of all great apes, both living and extinct. It is a massive umbrella term that covers everything from chimps to people to every single one of their common ancestors. But today we are not going to be talking about this. Instead, we are going to be talking about hominins. Hominins are pretty much human beings' direct ancestors, or the other species of humans which were once part of our family tree. And I now realize that I didn't actually draw a line when I did that because I got too cocky and tried to look at the camera at the same time. Oh, fuck. That's a terrible noise. And out of every single hominin that has ever lived, there is only one left, and it is us. I once again realized that I forgot to introduce myself. Anyway, my name is Milo, and today we're gonna be talking about... Today we are going all the way back to the beginning, to our very oldest known ancestor, none other than Sahelanthropus tchadensis. The first and so far only example of Sahelanthropus tchadensis was discovered by Michel Brunet. In 2001, Brunet led an expedition to the African country of Chad, and as is appropriate for a country whose name means lake, he decided to conduct his research along the banks of an extinct lake bed. In the world of human origins, one of the best places that you can look for human ancestors is in the Great Rift Valley, which historically has been one of many proposed locations that humans eventually evolved out of. However, Brunet decided to conduct his investigation far to the west. The lake bed which him and his team decided to excavate at had yielded countless other mammal skeletons in the lacustrine or lake sediments that have been deposited there over time. And so he decided to try his luck at seeing if he could find a dude. And sure enough, late in the year 2001, Brunet made a discovery which would change the way that we think about human evolution. There along the banks of this ancient lake bed, he found a skull. A skull of something which wasn't human. A skull which he ended up naming Tuomai was a shocking discovery. The skull was heavily damaged after millennia exposed to the elements, and despite how long the remains have been lying on this ancient lakebed, archaeologists were still able to reassemble almost an entire skull. The name Tuomai is derived from a traditional name in the Daza language, an endemic language with the native people in this part of Chad. Traditionally, the name is given to children who are born going into the dry season. The name roughly translates to hope of life, and it was believed that by naming a child this, it was a good luck charm which would help get them through a point where there was very high infant mortality. Not only is it awesome to name what would soon be known as the oldest human ancestor the hope of life, but it is also hilarious that it is a name which is traditionally given to people born at the beginning of the dry season, and they gave it to something which was found at the bottom of a dry lake. And with this paper, they were able to give Tuomai his very own genus and species. That species, of course, being... I have written this so many times to make this video, you'd think I would have memorized how to spell it by now. Sahelanthropus tchadensis. I tripped on a basket. Sahel is derived because the fossil was found in the Sahel region of Chad. Of course, anthropus comes from the ancient Greek for man, and tchadensis is from, well, the fact that it was found in Chad. I really don't know how much more I could say about that. So the entire thing translates roughly to the Sahel man from Chad. So let's talk a little bit about Tuomai, shall we? Firstly, it was presumed that he was male. Why? Could not fucking tell you. But considering that the owner of this skull walked the earth millions of years ago, I really don't think that they would care what I call them. So for the sake of this video, we're gonna call him him until proven otherwise. Along with the skull, they also found the remains of a leg bone. Though the leg bone has been the topic of some controversy, as even now they aren't really sure if it belongs to Sahelanthropus tchadensis. But the leg bone is something that's important, I'll get to that later. And what makes Tuomai so special is that he is the only one. In the last 21 years, we have not found a single other example of Sahelanthropus tchadensis. And thankfully, the skull, the most easily recognizable part of any sort of living creature, was the most intact. And it is from this skull that we have derived almost everything which we know about this species. And it's a really cool looking skull, isn't it? You see where I'm going with this, don't you? I have recently partnered with Sweetleaf Jewelry. They are an English silversmith who specialize in making a lot of rock-style rings. You know, big skulls, eagles, all that cool shit. Think Keith Richards, you're probably not far off. But for my Human Origin series, I have worked with them to create a very special line of merchandise. By combining two things that I love, ancient humans and jewelry, we have come out with our own line of skull rings. And the very first one of those is on my hand right now. Friends, I am over the moon to present to you my very first piece of merch. Your very own little Tuomai. I wanted to find a way to try and make a piece of merch that's more than just a t-shirt or a hoodie or a sticker. Something which you'll be proud to wear and doesn't have to be appreciated by people who watch my videos. This ring is available in any size you want, and it can be shipped to any part of the world. And as of you watching this video right now, it is live. But there's a catch. Because each one of these is sterling silver and handmade, there are only going to be 50 of them produced. Well, 51. I have the 51st. Well, I guess I have the 0th, but that doesn't sound nearly as good. Actually, it sounds kind of stupid. These rings will be on sale for as long as supplies last, and they come in a beautiful little handmade wooden box, which typically has a little velvet pouch that goes with it, but I lost the pouch. Sorry, Sweetleaf, that wasn't very good marketing on my part. And it even comes with an informational card telling you a little bit about the fossil, and it is even signed by yours truly. I kept this one because my signature looks like shit on it, so I promise you it'll look better on yours. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Sweetleaf Jewelers for helping me make this really bizarre dream come true, and if you would like to get a little Tuomai for yourself, check out the link in my description. And if you aren't able to get this one, then there will be others that will come out with future installations, but then you'll just miss out on collecting the set, I guess. Considering that this is the very first release, we are going to see how well it does and figure out where to go from there. And to the 50 of you who are going to end up with the twin of this ring, please at me on like Twitter or something, because I really want to see them. This is just really cool and I'm just basking in it right now. Okay, this part's over, let's get back to it. Just like when anything is discovered, there is one overarching question in everyone's mind. That is, of course, can I eat it? But since that's not a very scientific question, we then go to the second question that everyone wants to ask. And that, of course, is... Dating Tuomai was a pain in the ass. Typically, archaeologists will rely on things like C14 or radiocarbon dating in order to figure out how old a sample is. But just like most dating, carbon-14 dating is very conditional. It can only be used to date as far back as like, I don't know, is it 50,000 years? I think it's 50,000 years? and it can only be used on natural material. Now, the skull of Tuomai is not only fossilized, but it is a lot older than 50,000 years. So Brunet and his team had to come up with a different way to figure out how old this skull was. In situations like this, archaeologists will rely less on dating the artifact itself and more on dating the artifact's surroundings. This plays off of an archaeological concept known as the law of stratigraphy or the law of superposition, which dictates that things which are lower down are older, while things that are higher up are newer. It's one of these classic things. You've probably seen it if you ever went on a family trip to the Grand Canyon, where the sandstone layers down here are the oldest and the sandstone layers up here are the newest. But then how do you date these layers? Because these are probably going to be stone and definitely not be within 50,000 years old. So if you had a fossil, which was found right here, you would know that it is likely younger than this and older than this. Wait, no. Younger than this and older than this. But what good does that information do if you have no idea how old this and this are? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is at this point when scientists turn to a very simple method of dating. Just a little thing that you do on the weekend with your buddies. It's called cosmogenic radionucleotide dating. And I promise you, it's incredibly simple. So when a star explodes, it sends cosmic rays towards the Earth. Well, in every direction, but some of them end up hitting the Earth. Stars also send out cosmic rays when they are just existing as well, but when they explode, they send out a lot. Cosmic rays are high-energy protons, which is gibberish for stupid fucking fast. And it is the influence that these high-energy protons have on the surface of the Earth that allows us to be able to date stone. Sounds like my neighbors are dragging a gun safe across the floor. Things are really heating up there. When these protons hit the surface of the Earth, they create they create a new isotope called a cosmogenic nucleotide. These nucleotides are produced when that proton hits a rock, and the nucleotide is formed on the surface layer of that rock. Meaning that once that rock has been covered, there is no longer nucleotides being created because it is no longer in direct contact with the sky. And the nucleotides which are created are radioactive, meaning that they slowly decompose. So once they've been covered and are no longer in contact with the sky, the nucleotides are slowly just going to wear away until there's none left. And since we know how long the radioactive decay of these nucleotides takes, we can figure out how long it's been since the rock has been looking at the sky. So the way which Brunet was able to date the skull of Tuomai is because he was found buried in lacustrine lacustrine sediments, which is pretentious for lake sediments. I think I already said that earlier. That's okay, I'll say it twice. You can go impress your family with that buzzword. They'll all look at you like you have 4 heads. In the case of dating Tuomai, they were looking at 2 different isotopes, beryllium-9 and beryllium-10. I know I'm writing that in the wrong order, but I hate chemistry, and I'm graduated now, so I can do whatever I want and have to suffer no repercussion. Beryllium-9 is stable. It's great. He has a good job, he makes good money, his mom knows how to make gnocchi. Beryllium-10 is a shithead, rides a Honda Goldwing that he got from his dad, refers to all of his waitresses as sugar buns, and exclusively smokes Camel Crush menthols. What I'm trying to say is that Beryllium-10 is wildly unstable. So Beryllium-9 is stable, and Beryllium-10 has a half-life of 1.39 times 10 to the minus 6 years, which for those of you that dissociated during chemistry means that beryllium-10 after 1,400,000 years will have reduced to half of its initial concentration. So by analyzing the sediments around where they found the skull, they were able to find that the sediment layer above it was about 6.8 million years old, give or take 400,000 years, and that the bottom level was 7.1 million years, plus or minus 300,000 roughly. Meaning that Tuomai's age is estimated to be around 7 million years old. Meaning that as of right now, he is our oldest ancestor. Now, this is actually a really interesting date, because even before Tuomai was discovered, there was a theory that was pitched by some scientists who said that our last ancestor between, great apes and the human line should have been around 7 million years ago. And the reason which they thought of this was by looking at the biological clock, which is kind of roughly guesstimating how often mutations take place and figuring out how many mutations have happened since us and chimps had a common ancestor. And so people were throwing around this 7 million year idea even long before this skull was found. So the fact that they ended up finding one that bears a lot of resemblances between chimps and humans and hits that 7 million year date is pretty impressive. And needless to say, this was a huge source of pride for Chad when it was discovered in 2001. In a press conference between the then president of Chad and the dig leader Michel Brunet, they are recorded as having said that the ancestor of humanity is Chadian, which is fucking badass. Okay, now let's get to the fun stuff. Let's talk about the species description, or what we can tell about it from this one skull that we have. Alright, folks, let's get physical. One of the most prominent features of Sahelanthropus tchadensis is its very pronounced brow ridge. Now, if you've ever taken an anthropology class or an archaeology class, you may have also heard this referred to as a supraorbital torus, which is a running theme you will find in archaeology, where we take something really simple and then give it a name that's really fucking complicated for literally no reason. Oh, the ferrets are awake. Bring them down at the end of the video. They'll be here for the outro. It'll help motivate you to listen to the next 5 minutes of me rambling about something that's been dead for 7 million years. The supraorbital torus is typically located behind your eyebrows, and we still have it today as modern humans. Some people have one which is more pronounced, and others which are less so. But what you will notice when looking at the supraorbital torus of S. tchadensis compared to Homo sapiens is that it looks like it is their entire forehead. In reality, this is not the case. The human forehead comes from the fact that we have a very large cranial dome. The only reason why it looks like the supraorbital torus on S. tchadensis is their forehead is because their supraorbital torus is really fucking big and they don't have a cranial dome because their brain was really fucking small. While we currently only have one skull of S. tchadensis, we were able to rebuild it to such a level that we were actually able to get pretty concrete ideas of how big their brains were. Looking at encephalization or brain size is a crucial key in understanding how we evolved to become this way. And S. tchadensis had a brain that was around 360 cubic centimeters, which is tiny in comparison to a modern human's 1500 cubic centimeter brain. But what is interesting is that this brain size is roughly in line with what you would see in a modern chimpanzee. In fact, Sahelanthropus tchadensis shared quite a few features of chimpanzees, not only in size, build, and weight, but also their facial features, with a sort of long sloping face as opposed to a Homo sapiens more flat and, I guess, upwards face. Along with this, Sahelanthropus tchadensis also had some pretty killer teeth. While our modern teeth are much smaller to accommodate for our much softer foods, Sahelanthropus tchadensis was likely eating a lot of plants at the time and therefore has these long, almost pencil-like teeth, which you can actually see very nicely on this wonderful skull, available from Sweet Leaf Jeweler. Please, it's so fucking cool, buy it. And along with the teeth, Sahelanthropus tchadensis also had a very small, almost rectangular mouth that was much narrower than today's modern humans. Homo sapiens have an almost horseshoe-shaped mouth cavity, where Sahelanthropus tchadensis was like a tiny little shovel with very long teeth and a, I guess, middle span of the mouth that was very narrow, creating more of a rectangle than a semicircle. Now, while all of this is pretty interesting, the most intriguing part of Sahelanthropus tchadensis' description is that there is adequate evidence to suggest that it may have been bipedal. Bipedalism. Fuck yeah. Bipedalism is one of the most important traits that we look at when understanding how we evolved to be the way we are today. In the mammalian world, bipedalism is something which is almost exclusively human. There are a couple other things that do it, like kangaroos do it, and those weird little pangolins do it. But there is really no other mammal on Earth that walks with the upright posture of a human being. So part of the reason why I showed you the March of Life or the March of Progress at the beginning of this episode is because it highlights this idea that we went from a quadrupedal ancestor and slowly evolved to walk as a biped. But there is some evidence to suggest now that we may have actually had an ancestor that was bipedal, and from it evolved some of our quadrupedal cousins like chimpanzees and other great apes. And while the fossils for Sahelanthropus tchadensis are still a little bit sparse, there is enough evidence to suggest that it is not out of the question that they may have been bipedal. The largest piece of evidence for this comes from the foramen magnum, the hole in the base of the skull into which the spinal cord connects. If you look at the difference between a modern human and Sahelanthropus tchadensis, you can see that there is a similar orientation with the foramen magnum being located at the bottom of the skull. Now, if you were to compare the Homo sapien skull to the base of really any quadrupedal mammal skull, I don't know, chimpanzee, a cow, anything like that, you can see that the foramen magnum is located not so much under the skull as much as on the back or on the sort of like bottom, I guess corner, if that makes any sense. Now this is an adaptation which allows us to carry the massive weight of our head upright. If we had a foramen magnum in the base of our skull over here, we would constantly have to be putting a huge amount of effort to keep our heads up. So by having this head more perched on top of your body, it is an adaptation which allows for us to do this. Someone once tweeted me saying I should do more high kicks in my videos. We aren't really sure if Sahelanthropus tchadensis was a habitual biped or something which was bipedal all of the time, or if it represented more of a transitional state where, despite having bipedal characteristics, it was still able of transitioning between bipedalism and quadrupedalism. But just the fact that we have enough evidence to suggest that it may have begun to evolve to walk on two legs is enough to say that this represents a very interesting key in uncovering our family story. Now, there are plenty of other things that we can look for in an animal in order to determine whether or not it's bipedal or quadrupedal, and we do this for pretty much all of our ancestors. Things like leg bones can indicate whether or not a leg was designed for climbing or gripping on a tree trunk, or whether it was designed for long strides. The spine can indicate whether or not you were supporting weight on the front limbs, or whether or not you were just supporting the weight of your skull. And the pelvis can also indicate whether or not your legs were intended to bend outwards to grip a tree, or if they were intended to, fine, I'll do it again, do this! But the problem is that we don't have any of those things from Sahelanthropus tchadensis because the fossil was so heavily damaged. As I mentioned before, at the dig site of Sahelanthropus tchadensis, they also uncovered a leg bone. And in 2004, it was confirmed that this leg bone did belong to a hominid. However, there has been very little research done on this leg bone, and we, even now, in 2022, still don't have a full report on it. Or at least a report which confirms whether or not it was part of Sahelanthropus tchadensis or not. But what research has been done on the leg bone has proven that it looks very similar to a human leg bone, suggesting that it was also evolved for bipedalism rather than a quadrupedal ape or a tree-living species. Unfortunately, it is also missing the top where the knee would be and the bottom where the ankle would be, which would be, you know, the two best ways to figure out if your knees are supposed to bend up and down or side to side to grip onto things. Kinda sucks, honestly. But because the fossil is so incomplete, there is very little that we know about this ancient species. However, I suppose there are a few major takeaways, or, I guess in the words of It's Always Sunny, a few major implications. The world that Sahelanthropus tchadensis lived in was wildly different than our world today. Living at the end of the Miocene, Sahelanthropus tchadensis would have lived in what today is a desert, but at the time was a lush forest. This potentially bipedal species likely shared a lot of characteristics with today's great apes, probably equally as comfortable walking on the ground as they are in the treetops. Their large teeth suggest that these animals may have eaten quite a lot of plant and leaf material, and their position along the edge of this ancient lakeshore could suggest that they were at home in this transitional space where land meets water. Perhaps this individual found along the banks of an ancient lakeshore had frequented the area to cool off on a hot day or to get a drink. And perhaps if you were to go back in time and overlook this ancient lakeshore from a ridge somewhere, perhaps you would have seen a group of these animals along the riverbank trying to cool off in the hot African sun. As it stands right now, this very well could be a common link between us and great apes. It's almost impossible to tell until you find something older, or at least another example of it. And there aren't many things which I can guarantee, but what I can guarantee is that somewhere out there in the dusts of some ancient lake bed is another one of these right now, waiting to be discovered. Okay, now as promised, I did say I'd show you the ferrets, so here they are. This is Mustela furrow. We call her Moose. She is an incredibly intelligent animal who is capable of complex thought and frequently will carry out multi-step heist plans. She may look cute, but she's actually on the FBI's top 10 most wanted. I love you. You're a little goober. This is Midas. This is Midas. He looks like a possum and can't walk in a straight line. I know, Midas, I love you. You're a goober, but I love you. And you're kind of stupid, but I love you anyway. All right. Yeah, I know, buddy. I know all about it. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching this video. If you are interested in archaeology, pseudo-archaeology, and conspiracy debunking, feel free to subscribe because I make plenty more content like this. And if you'd like to support what I do here on the channel, feel free to check out these sick rings available through Sweetleaf Jeweler. First 50 of you are going to be happy campers. And you can also support me on Patreon. The list of all of my patrons is going to be in the credits of this video. As always, patrons get early, ad-free access to all of my videos, so they got to see it before you even knew it existed. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter for video updates and a more personal look at my life. I post this cool cowboy picture on Instagram. Should be all the reason that you need to follow it. And also a fan mail section. Feel free to send me fan mail at this address here. Because it'll be very fun. Please don't send me anything weird or stupid or illegal. Remember to stay curious, stay inquisitive, and as always, remember it's not the size that counts, it's where you put your neck hole.